You're on air.
All right. I call the 2,352nd meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. This meeting is being conducted by video conference with limited in-person public comment opportunities. The public has been strongly encouraged to participate in this meeting by joining the Zoom webinar or watching on the city's YouTube channel or on Comcast cable channel 30 in city limits. There will be opportunities for the public to give oral testimony via Zoom and in person at City Hall during today's meeting. During the community comment time and during the audience testimony part of this evening's public hearing, council will take limited in-person comments. If you would like to address council in person, you may come to City Hall during that part of the agenda. Seating in chambers will be limited, and the speakers will be asked to leave the building when finished. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by emailing ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. For those participating via Zoom or submitting a yellow comment card for those in person at City Hall. When it is time to take public comments, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, the Zoom participant list, and the Zoom chat to see if anyone would like to speak. We will take comments in the order that they are received and seen. The public may also participate in the Zoom webinar by phone by dialing 1-253-215-8782, entering webinar ID 841-6722-7661 and passcode 097479. If you call in and would like to make comments, dial 9 to raise your hand. The public may submit written comments by email to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. Contamos con servicio de traducción al español cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad para reuniones por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Translation services are also available in other languages. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya, etc. Treaty with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Tonight, we will be continuing with work on the tree code, which in some ways hopes to return the land a little bit to what it was like when colonists arrived. Tonight, our announcements. Join NCPRD and other volunteers to enhance habitat at North Clackamas Park on Saturday, February 26th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Tools, gloves, and refreshments will be provided. The next Letting Library Lecture Series event this year is coming up on Wednesday, March 2nd at 6 p.m. The event is called Women's History Project, A Personal Perspective. You can watch the event on Comcast Channel 30 in the city or on the city's YouTube channel. The Milwaukie Poetry Committee and the Letting Library are hosting a bilingual poetry reading in Arabic and English on Saturday, March 5th from 2 till 4 p.m. The reading is in partnership with the Iraqi Society of Oregon, and the Al-Matanabi Street starts here. Learn about how to properly care for mason bees on Saturday, March 12th at 10 a.m. The event takes place in person at the Milwaukie Community Center. Tools, gloves, and refreshments will be provided. For more information about each of these events and others, please find the city's homepage, where you will find the city calendar at milwaukeeoregon.gov, or call 503-786-7555, and staff will provide you with the information you need or connect you with someone who can help. All right, our next item is the Milwaukie High School Outstanding Student Award. This will be presented, as always, by our wonderful principal, Carmen Gelman.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
We're finally on.
Hello. Okay.
So happy to be here.
So happy to have you. This is Monty Woods and Marika.
Yes. Hi,
Monty's
everyone.
mom.
Greetings.
Great. We were having a little struggle getting into the meeting. So anyway, today I'm presenting. Huh?
Can you see us both good?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay.
So today I get to present Monty Woods, who is a senior at Milwaukie High School. And I sent you information about him, but I literally, since he was a freshman, was like, I am going to nominate this kiddo for Student of the Month. He is like one of my favorite people, not just in school, but just as a human being. Is just such an awesome person, kind and caring and mature, and just has got one of the biggest hearts. So and the prettiest smile, and I hate wearing the mask, but I get to see you today. So I just couldn't wait to present you all with Monty Woods. And Monty, I'm going to share a couple of things that some staff said about you.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
And
You gonna have Mama crying here now.
we'll get the cleanup. You want me to wait? You guys. Okay. Because he's amazing, and you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I had Monty in NGSS biology during CDL. His participation and communication was excellent, and I thoroughly enjoyed him as a student. But it wasn't until I got to meet Monty in person that I really was able to appreciate his work ethic and kindness. Even though he is masked up, you can tell he has a huge smile at all times. He greets me every time we pass, and his salutations, are enthusiastic and real. His positivity and energy is contagious, and I only wish I had the chance to work with him under more normal circumstances, and that I actually could see his smile every day. Miss Matthews.
Oh, thank you. Make sure you tell everyone we thank them for their comments too.
I will.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. So Monty's been an active member of our community throughout high school, and I've seen his involvement really come to fruition this year. In a year when the front office staff constantly has their hands full, Monty is a reliable and responsible assistant. He takes care of business all over the school and is a welcoming face for those who meet him at the front desk. Furthermore, Monty has built relationships throughout the school offices and brightens every day by saying hello, checking in with people, and sharing about himself. We value community and relationships at Milwaukie, and Monty is an incredible example of the importance of those values. Mr. Church.
Oh,
Who's that?
That's a counselor.
Counselor? Okay, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Monty's the epitome of lighting up a room when he walks into it. His heart is kind, he's a good friend, and a respectful human being. Miss Kate.
Oh, that's her secretary.
Oh, the secretary. Okay, nice.
When I first came to Milwaukie High School, Monty was one of the first friendly faces I saw. He instantly took me as a staff member under his wing as far as helping me get to know other students. He is respectful, articulate, kind, and a leader in the Black Student Union. I am so proud to say that I know him and can't wait to see what he does in the future. Miss Walters.
Okay. She does like the like grading. And she
Oh.
does BSU with me.
Oh, nice,
Yeah, she
nice.
does BSU.
Okay.
So those are just some of the couple things that people said, and other people said things, but I don't make it too long. And I just want to say that I absolutely adore you. You know how much love I have for you, Monty.
Mm-hmm.
You have been such a source of inspiration, and you're just such a wonderful human being. I'm so honored to like be on this journey with you, and so grateful that you've been on this journey with me, because it's been crazy for 4 years and through the construction and like
Man.
and I just feel like we have this like kindred spirit. And I was talking to Monty today, and he's like, I remember when you came to Row, and I knew then, right? And like, seriously, Monty has been one of the people I go to so many times for like support, for helping with other kids. He's just a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful for you. And Mom, you've done an incredible job. He's just such a wonderful, kind person. And anyway,
Oh, see, you cried.
I want to present you with Monty.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Miss T.
Am I allowed to say anything? Can I
Sure.
speak?
Sure.
Oh, hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Marisa, Monty's mother, and I just would like to thank everybody for taking the time to recognize my son and the efforts he's done. These have been a lot of challenges for the last 4 years with me being in and out of the hospital, but Monty has maintained his integrity, even supporting me. As Miss G was talking, he supported me. You know, it was like, he's almost like the parent in a way, you know, and I see the theme of what the other teachers and counselors said is about his kindness and his responsibility. And he's that way at home too. He's very responsible, very kind. He doesn't mind helping others. And I just want to say thank you guys for recognizing him. I can't wait to call the family members and tell them that we're going to Zoom with the mayor, the principal, everybody, you know, and just thank you. I mean, I'm at a loss for words. This is not just an honor for Monty. It's an honor for me too, as his parent, to be able to say, you know, his fellow students, teachers, and everybody recognize him and all his hard work that he's done over the last 4 years.
Well, thank you for raising such a wonderful human being. That's one of the hardest jobs there is.
Yes.
We always take a few minutes and have each of the counselors say something before I present the award. Who would like to go first today? Kathy.
I'm happy to kick us off. Thank you both for being here. It's so nice to meet you both. And I just, you know, like, we always get to meet amazing students because Principal Gelman brings us great people every single month, and we're always blown away. But it is very rare that I hear her describe a student as being such a tremendous support for staff. And this really has been an incredibly difficult few years. So I just think that speaks volumes about you, Monty. So thank you for being that person in hard times. That's not a road that many students would choose. And I think that it's really a gift that you've given to all of the school, because the staff has been trying to carry all the students through all this hard stuff, and to have that returned by students makes a difference.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
I do have a question. You seem to be a really joyful person through a really hard few years. What makes you so joyful?
You know, my thing is, I get up every day and I just say it's a new day. You know, whatever happened yesterday, whatever happened last week, it's in that day, it's in the week. I get up every day and I try to put a smile on my face and just clean slate. So that's what, you know, and I might have a bad day sometimes, but most of the time, you just got to be happy. You have to. It just gets
I love it. Can you teach me how to do that?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a brilliant philosophy.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So who would like, Angel?
Wow, what a beautiful human being. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mom, for raising such a wonderful person and allowing us to share this achievement with you. I'm just always, Ms. G knocks it out of the park. She brings, she introduces us to leaders in the community who sort of fill different roles in the high school community. And I'm just really grateful that I get to share these few little minutes with you. And I really appreciate you and all of the ways that you're clearly impacting the people around you. It definitely, as a mom, it just really warms my heart to hear the really sweet things that the people in your life are saying about you. And I hope that makes you feel really proud.
It does. It really does. It really does. Monty's a modest person. He doesn't like me to make a big thing about even he's like, Mom, don't put it on Facebook, don't do this. I'm like,
he's calling the whole family. Oh my gosh,
he's such a modest. He's so humble, and I'm like, sometimes you just have to celebrate some of the good things that you do in spite of. It's not saying that you're over prideful person. It's just celebrating you, and I thank you guys for taking out the time to celebrate him.
Yeah, Monty, be proud. Be proud. It's wonderful to be recognized for your good works and who you are, and that obviously shines through. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to speak about him.
Lisa.
I can go next. It's really nice to meet you, Monty, and I would second all the things my fellow counselors have said. That your attitude of getting up every day and starting afresh is not something that's easy to do for people, I think. And in high school, and in a high school where you had 2 years in pods, and then you had COVID, and then you've had not the usual high school experience, and so I think it's wonderful that you still have that great outlook. And the principal sent us some info about your activities, and one of them I kind of wanted to ask you about, which was the mentoring elementary students, because I think with your kind of outlook, you're the perfect person to do that. So I'd like to just hear a little bit about your experience in that.
Well, I have to say I actually did it my freshman year. I did it for I think I did it for a whole year, and I loved it. They assigned me to a kid. The kiddo, he was great. He was in the 3rd grade, and I went to Ardenwald Elementary. It was great. I loved it. And then it wasn't even him. I impacted the whole class. Like, the teacher told me the whole class couldn't wait till I came and spend a little bit of time with them. So I loved it. That was a great experience.
Great.
And I can testify to he would come home and talk about his kids at the school, and this is his freshman year. And I was like, good, he's finding a niche that he likes to do, Yeah. So yeah, I can second that. He really did enjoy that process.
Well, whether it's working with kids or whatever you choose to do, I wish you all the best as you finish high school and move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out.
And I will really quickly say that it's very rare for us to put 9th graders as an elementary mentor. Like, that was specifically because of Monty's ability to work with others and just all of that we did that with him.
Nice. Appreciate that.
Because I think that was a senior course.
It was a senior course. And I think because the next year he wasn't able to do it because of COVID, he was so disappointed about that. I think that was one of the most disappointing things about.
We lost you guys. The sound went away. Doesn't say you're muted, but you just all of a sudden went away.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go. Look at these beautiful Black people here. I love it. It's Black History Month. It's Black Excellence. You all just being is great. And it's great to have you here, Monty. And it's great that you're sharing this moment with your mom. Because there will come a time, but that'll be later. But it's great. And just to see the love that is in this room and all the great things that you're doing, I mean, it's just, it's really fantastic. And if you ever need anything, Monty, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay.
I will do whatever I can to help you. If you need to navigate anything, I will help you. And feel free to reach out, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing and caring.
Yeah. I too am really moved by you. I think there's a lot of adults that grow old and die and never reach the kind of wisdom that you have achieved about how to live your life and how to be in the moment and live in happiness. I mean, that's guru kind of stuff right there. I love that you work with little kids and that you have been a leader for your student union. That's really broad abilities and sensibilities. I think you'll go on to do extraordinary things, and I think community colleges are a wonderful place to do that. That's what I did. I went to my local community college and did very well by that.
That's good. That's good.
So yeah. I look forward to hearing what you decide to do with your education and with your life. I think it'll be impressive, whatever it is.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mayor. We appreciate your comments and everyone that's spoken about Monty. I would like to say again, thank you. We really appreciate it. I couldn't have done it by myself. It took all of us to help raise, make sure that he got to where he is. So I just want to thank all the teachers, the principal, Miss G. You know how much Monty loves you. He talks about Miss G all the time. So I just want to thank you for being a support for him too also.
Scott, can you put up the award so I can read it?
Ms. G, can you pass along my email to Monty?
I absolutely can.
Thank you.
The City of Milwaukie. Sorry. The City of Milwaukie is proud to recognize for outstanding student achievement in academics, civic engagement, and extracurricular activities at Milwaukie High School, Monty Woods. Let it be known to all that on this 15th day of February 2022, the City Council of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas and the State of Oregon, recognized this student as an excellent example of the bright future of this community and nation.
Thank you. Yay! Congratulations, Monty.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mayor, before he leaves, I also just wanted to say something. Hi, Monty. My name's Ann Ober. I'm the city manager here in Milwaukie. I spend not enough time with your principal. I'm going to be honest, because she is wonderful. I'd love to spend more. But it looks like you're going to be staying in the area. And we have a lot of opportunities for you to make a difference here in Milwaukie too. And I don't know if you're ever interested, or you, Mom, honestly, because it sounds like you have an incredible insight as well. But if you ever want to engage with us on any of our boards or committees, your outlook and your energy would be just so amazing to have working with us as we're trying to make some really big changes. So if you're interested, Principal Gelman knows how to find me, and I would love to engage with both of you if you're up for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
we really appreciate that.
We'll definitely look into it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very cool. All right. Our next item is just a high school update from Principal Gelman.
Yep. So I want to say, Monty, what'll happen is I'll get the certificate at the school. They'll send it to me, and if you want to come over and take a picture with the mayor, we can do that. And then, also your picture is going to be on their website as Student of the Month. So.
What website?
The City Council, and it's the city
Council website. Okay.
And then also, we put it on our social media as well. So at Milwaukie. But thank you. Y'all are welcome to stay, or you can go because this meeting takes a long time, but just thank you so much. And I appreciate you. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
We
G.
can't thank you guys
Elsa.
enough.
God bless everybody. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you, Ms. G. It's been a long time.
I know. Thank you. Good to see you
Take
too.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
So Ms. G, just let me know if he wants to do that picture.
Okay. Yeah, he's so awesome. I love him. Update. Let me see. It's just we're just trying to get through. Lots of stuff. Obviously, there's like stuff happening around masks and all that, but we got our graduation rates from last year, and so I was really excited to see our numbers go up. So over the past 3 years, our graduation rates have consistently gone up, and so I'm really excited about that because obviously we've been in some turmoil, not just with the pandemic, but even with the rebuilding of the school and just all of that stuff. So to see those numbers going up has been really exciting for me. And it also allowed us to really look at our systems as a school being in a pandemic, because you have to do things differently. And so we were able to like make some shifts and some changes to support our kids better, because we had to think differently, and we had to like put some systems in place to make sure that we're like not missing any kids and what do they need, and just all these things that we were able to put into place. And now that we're back in school, we've kept some of those systems that were really effective. And so I think that's one of the reasons that kids are continuing to do well as we move forward, is because we do have a different way of viewing things and also just the system. So I'm really excited about that. We're planning, one of my teachers is planning an equity. We're putting together a project so that with the equity team, where kids are going to be trained. So they'll come in for a day or two full days to be trained on how to facilitate equity conversations. And then we're going to do kind of like a workshop style for kids next year, where kids facilitate for kids conversations around race, gender, all the, isms, I'll say. And so I'm super excited about that, because I think kids have been asking for it. We've started culture conversations because our 9th and 10th graders haven't been in school for a long time. And so just the social skills, or how to navigate social media and all of those things. So we've started just kind of having casual culture conversations during lunch once a week, where kids come drop in just to talk about what's going on and how to fix it, right? Like, what are some of the things that we can do to support kids? How do we empower kids to also be in the work? And what are their thoughts? And so that's been really I've really enjoyed that. So yeah, those are just some of the things. And obviously, we're always looking to improve and make things better. We've been doing a lot around equitable grading practices. So that's something that our district wants to implement next year. We've taken the lead on that. And so we're noticing kind of the shifts. So all of our 9th grade teams are doing that. And then some of our upper classes are doing that, but we're now piloting. So we'll be able to inform kind of like some of the successes and also some of the pitfalls that, they might want to look at. So we as a district might want to look at. So that's very exciting, because kids actually we're allowing kids to really show us their knowledge rather than grading them on behavior or like our own personal biases or what kind of relationship we have with them. But we're allowing kids to really show us what their knowledge is. And then we also want them to continue learning. So if they make a mistake, like, can they redo the work so that they actually learn what it is that we want them to learn? And a lot of times it's a big shift, because many times you hear things like, well, we're not preparing them for college. Well, we're not, right? But we're not preparing them for college if they're not able to get down that content knowledge, right? That's what's preparing them for college, is to really understand the content, and also to provide kids and teach them soft skills, which, how to advocate, how to facilitate those conversations. Those are the things that are going to help them succeed in college and life. And so I'm very excited about our grading practices and just how many people are on board to do that. about it. Any questions? I can't hear you.
I have so many. But now is not the time or the place.
Okay. Mayor, I can't hear you. Your microphone's off.
Sorry, my computer was making noise and I was trying not to interrupt you. Yeah, lots of questions, but again, like Desi said, not the time or the place. Sounds super cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to bring us wonderful young people.
Thank you. Thank you for the space to do that and the platform. All right, y'all have a wonderful night, unless someone has any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
For the next item, there's been a bit of a change in presenters from what's listed in the script.
Okay.
So after Councilor Faulkner makes her remarks there, Jacob Sherman is joining us from the Milwaukie Historical Society, and Kay Endo is here to make remarks on it.
And you pronounce that K?
Correct. Kay.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So our next item of business is the Japanese American Incarceration Remembrance Day Proclamation, which will be presented by, or introduced at least, by Councilor Angel Falconer. And then you all probably heard all of that already. So, Angel.
Yeah, well, I don't have a presentation, so I will kick it off very quickly here to our guest speakers and presenters. I'll just note that I was surprised back in December when we had our Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day to learn that we hadn't done this before. I guess in my mind we had. So I really am very grateful to Mr. Sherman and Endo for joining us and giving us a little bit more background and a little bit more information that I think our community will find very valuable. So I will kick it off. Over, I should say.
All right.
Great, thank you, Councilor Falconer and Mayor Gamba. My name is Jacob Sherman. I'm a resident of the Ardenwald neighborhood, and I'm here tonight representing the Milwaukie Museum. I think as many of you know, 2 weeks ago,
we held an event here recognizing the 80 years after internment of Milwaukee's Japanese American community. This was a Letting Library lecture series event, kind of in partnership with the Milwaukie Museum and a number of other partners, and individuals who might be interested in this can go to the city's YouTube page and find more about that event. But this was really kind of also the culmination of some research that a number of people had been doing for the last 6-8 months that started kind of out of some of my own personal curiosities about the history of my home. And in looking through the 1940 census, started to see kind of name after name of different Japanese Americans who lived in the Milwaukie area, and started to kind of ask the question, you know, if these individuals and families lived here in 1940, what happened in 1942? Kind of during the war, and recognizing that this year would be the 80th anniversary of the forced internment of many of those individuals. The event that we held was in partnership with the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, who is a phenomenal partner on this, and opened up some of their archives, showing us documents about Mr. Endo's mother kind of firsthand, and was also supported kind of in partnership with some funding from the Clackamas Arts Alliance. So without much more on that, I would encourage anybody who is interested to, again, go to the city's YouTube page where they can see the event, hear more about Milwaukee's Japanese American community, as well as kind of the broader Japanese American experience in Oregon. And in kind of advance of the proclamation, I'd love to welcome a very special guest who's honoring us tonight, a lifelong Milwaukeean, Mr. Kay Endo, whose mother, Chio, was someone we actually kind of profiled in our presentation 2 weeks ago. So I'll welcome up Mr. Kay Endo to share a few remarks before the proclamation.
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Kay Endel. I was born September 26, 1933. So on the day that we were incarcerated, I was 8 years old, and we went from Mrs. Hosley took us to the Gresham Fairgrounds, and then from there we were transported to the Portland Assembly Center, which is now the Portland Convention Center. And then that was in May of 1942. Then August of 42, we were relocated to Minidoka, Idaho, which is 16 miles northeast of Twin Falls, Idaho. And we were there for 2.5 years, and 6 months we were on seasonal leave to Ontario, Oregon. And the one interesting thing about the people in Minidoka, they saved the farmers in southeast Idaho and eastern Oregon. They harvested the sugar beets and potatoes. The sugar beets were used for ammunition in the water district. And our family, there were 6 of us, and my mom, 7, and my dad passed away in March of 1942. And that was a very, very, very sad day. And then in May, as noted, we were incarcerated. In that Milwaukie area, from Milwaukie Marketplace down to where Bob's Red Mill was over 60 Japanese people living in that area. And of that, I could only find 11 that are still alive. And there are 3 of us that live in that area. There's Dutch Watanabe, Tommy Watanabe, and myself. And I'm the only one that lives in the property that I was born at in 1933. So that's just a little bit history of what happened. And I like to thank, after the war, I'd like to thank some of the people in Milwaukie that really helped us, like the First State Bank of Milwaukie, which is now Key Bank, Fred Blasher at Price Right Nurse Grocery, Rolf and Bud Cooper at Cooper Meat Market, Perry Pharmacy and their family, the Milwaukie Pharmacy, the Hosley Furniture, Joe and Junior Bernard Garage. And as you know, Joe Jr. was the mayor at Milwaukie, and his son was also. Bill Roberts at Roberts Barbershop, and Max Pitt and Milwaukie Lumber Company. And they really were very nice. And also the educators at the Milwaukie school system. And as far as I know, there was no discrimination against us coming back or when we went. There was probably some behind the back we didn't know about. And I'd like to thank you guys for commemorating our deal before we were incarcerated 80 years ago. And I thank you again.
Thank you for coming in and presenting. That must have been a pretty frightening and disorienting thing for a 8-year-old boy to experience.
Well, in a way it was, but when we went to camp, we didn't eat with the family, we ate with our peers, so it wasn't quite as bad. And we played all day with our people because the older people had jobs, so they couldn't come and eat with us at times. And my mom was she was a cook's helper, so she couldn't help. She had to help cook, so she did not eat with us. And my older brother was a dishwasher.
Wow.
Any other questions?
Yeah, let's see. Does anybody else on council have questions?
I don't have any other questions, but thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. And And yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your memories with us and offering to be here with us.
Thank you very much.
I would add my thanks as well. And if people are looking for more of the history, there are some videotaped interviews with like 5 or 6 people from Milwaukie on a thing called, I think it's, Jacob will probably remember better than me, but I think it's called the Den Show, DENSHO digital library, where they interviewed. In fact, I think Mr. Endo might have been one of the people interviewed for that.
Yes, I was.
You were? Okay. Well, you could probably tell us where to find it then. But I watched those interviews. One was in Japanese, but the others were all in English. And I found them fascinating. I found them very interesting about the history of Milwaukie, of the internment camps, and all of that. Yeah. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I will read the proclamation. And forgive me if I mispronounce any of the names. Whereas Milwaukee's history is important to understand, observe, and recognize from all perspectives. And whereas Milwaukie had a small but thriving Japanese American community in the early 1940s with at least 87 individuals of Japanese heritage reported in the 1940 United States Census. And whereas the last names of these individuals and families included Endo, Fujita, Hirofuji, Koida, Kuribayashi, Nakamura, Sasaki, Shinto, Terusaki, Takemoto, Tamisayu, Yoshi Izawa, Yamada, Yoshitomi, and Watanabe. And whereas many of these families were successful farmers, florists, or nursery operators, including the Watanabes and Yoshitomis, who once had large celery farms at the present-day Minthorn Springs natural area. And whereas on February 19, 1942, United States President Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, resulting in the forced removal and incarceration of over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast, over 2/3 of whom were U.S. citizens. And whereas on May 7th, 1942, people of Japanese ancestry from Clackamas County and eastern Multnomah County were ordered to report without trial or due process to the Portland Assembly Center before they were forced into concentration camps in unfamiliar places like the Minidoka War Relocation Center in Hunt, Idaho. And whereas we recognize the Japanese families in Milwaukie and Clackamas County that were uprooted, and yet somehow, despite these experiences, thousands of young Japanese American men, including young Japanese American men from Milwaukie, demonstrated exemplary heroism and courage to enlist in the U.S. Armed Forces and bravely fight in World War II to defend the nation that was abridging their own freedoms at home. And whereas we recognize that when released, some of these members of our community may have lost their homes or property, and that Japanese Americans worked hard to rebuild their lives. And whereas in 1983, the Federal Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians found that Executive Order 9066 was not justified by military necessity, and decisions that resulted from it were not driven by analysis of military conditions. And whereas on August 10th, 1988, United States President Ronald Reagan signed into law the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, finding that Executive Order 9066 was not justified by national security and that the incarceration constituted a grave injustice to the Japanese Americans. And whereas on February 22nd, 2022, the City of Milwaukie, the Milwaukie Museum, and the Japanese American Museum of Oregon held a Letting Library Lecture Series event to educate the community about Milwaukee's Japanese American history and to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the issuance of Executive Order 9066, an event which forever changed the course of American history. And whereas the city of Milwaukee is proud of its Japanese American history and recognizes and values the ongoing contribution from its Japanese American community. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukee, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas and in the State of Oregon, do hereby proclaim February 19th, 2022 as Japanese American Incarceration Remembrance Day. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Endo, for coming in and sharing a little bit of your story. I look forward to finding that site and watching those interviews and learning more. And on behalf of the city of Milwaukee, we apologize for what happened to your family.
May I say in Japanese, domo arigato. That means thank you very much.
You're very welcome. All right. Hang on while I find my script. All right, community comments. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community member statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak, please email ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom or write a comment in the Zoom chat to indicate that you wish to speak. Before you make your comments, please state your name and city of residence for the record. If you would like the city to follow up, please submit your contact information to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because information provided during the community comments may be new, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, is there follow-up from the February 1st community comments, Ms. Ober?
There is not.
Okay, and I know Scott has at least one person in council chambers that would like to speak. So whoever that is may proceed.
That's correct, Mayor Gamba. We have one person in comment. I don't see any others at this moment, but our speaker is Karen Dasbala. And I'll start the timer. You won't see it on camera, but I'll start it for the usual 3 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Miss Kiran Das Bala, and my address is 9725 Southeast 29th Street, Milwaukie, Oregon, 97222. And the reason I'm here right now, that after a long time of my divorce, I found out my ex-husband, his name is Dr. Subodh Kumar Das. And he had 2 stores in Portland. And I used to go buy grocery, Indian grocery, and it's Indian grocery store. And I just found out 2 weeks ago, somebody was working and he looks just like my ex-husband. And I recognized him from in Kentucky, that he used to be one of our best friends. And he owns those 2 stores, and I want somebody to help me get one of the store because it wasn't part of my divorce. So he's holding on to all those money for all by himself. And I did not know. So please help me, or at least go there. It's 2 of them. There is 2. One is in near Cracker Barrel, and one is in 60 Division. 2 of them. So please help me get that one of them, or he should sell one of them, or help me go and get another store in Milwaukee. That would be a good idea, to open an Indian store in Milwaukee. So thank you very much. Please help me. Thank you. I live in the same house so far. So thanks a lot.
I don't see any other hand raised or comments in the OCR email. And you're muted.
Thanks. All right. Tonight's consent agenda includes the minutes of the City Council from January 18th, 2022, a work session, and January 18th, 2022, a regular session. It includes a resolution authorizing a court amnesty program from May 1st through July 30th, 2022. A resolution authorizing an agreement for professional planning services for the housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy reports. And lastly, a resolution authorizing an engineering services contract with Tetra Tech, Inc. to provide professional services for the SCADA system upgrade. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Oh, no, we're good. Anne, did you have something you wanted to say before we started the hearing?
I did.
It's not on here.
There are a couple of items, and we don't have a time set aside for me generally talking to you all tonight. So the first is that COVID numbers are going way down. And that means that we're probably in pretty good position to come back in person. I wanted to confirm that we will be doing the retreat in person, but Councillor Beatty actually reached out, and the mayor also supported starting back on March 1st in person. I wanted to find out if that was generally something you all wanted to do. Okay, perfect. Then we will start doing meetings in person again on March 1st, and hopefully we won't have another spike and we'll get to stay this time. It'd be really exciting. The second piece is we had Councillor Beatty also sent out some emails talking about an emergency situation that Portland is talking to the state about, which is how to support their houseless community. And it was discussed in an LOC meeting. We have not seen a letter of support, but there is a lot of discussion happening amongst the cities. And so I did, while I had you all together, just wanted to talk about where staff is on this and see if we were in general alignment with where council would be. Money towards helping support our houseless community, especially while we're trying to build affordable housing in the region, would be much, much valued, whether it was for here or for any other city in the region. We are generally, I've had a conversation with our officer who does our houseless support. There are definitely ways that we could further support our houseless community if we had funding. So generally, I think staff is saying, yeah, it'd be great. And if there's a sign-on letter, we would recommend that the city proceed on such a letter. I can send it around to all of you if it does come out and get your feedback. But I wanted to just start by seeing if there was any general support, since this would be at the legislature.
I think there's general support for supporting homeless services. The only concerns that I've heard raised by some people is what exactly they're talking about when they're talking about a shelter that's going to hold 1,000 people. I think there are some concerns there. But
okay, sounds good. We will send anything around that comes out, and you all can decide if you want to weigh in on it. We won't be creating anything ourselves, but at least I know to send it your way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Is that it? All right. So our next item is coming back to the tree code. Comprehensive Plan Implementation Tree Code, an ordinance, and a resolution. The continued public hearing on the proposed tree code amendment, file number ZA-2021-002 is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to receive updates from staff and take any further public comment, and for council to deliberate on the proposed tree code amendments. Does any council member wish to announce actual or potential conflicts of interest? Sort of seeing none. Lisa's off camera, but she didn't have any last time, so okay. So the staff report will be given by our Climate and Natural Resources Manager, Natalie Rogers. Take it away, Natalie.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having us here today. My name is Natalie. I'm the Climate and Natural Resources Manager in our Public Works Department for the City of Milwaukee. So we're just bringing you tonight some small updates around our draft tree code, which is part of the larger comprehensive plan implementation process, as well as a couple bits of additional information just to answer some questions that we've been hearing in testimony, to make sure everyone is up to date with essentially all the information that the community might want to hear. So I'm going to just share a few slides. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. I just want to start off with saying that everyone is welcome to reach out to the city regarding urban forest issues. We have a growing urban forest program, and we now have an urban forest email inbox, urbanforest@milwaukieoregon.gov. You're welcome to send any tree-related questions regarding permits, regarding this draft tree code, as well as just general questions around trees and tree care to this email inbox. And myself and our urban forester are kind of going through them and making sure folks get responses. We also have an urban forest phone line, which is that number you see there, 503-786-7655, for folks who want to talk and leave a message, and we'll get back to you regarding your tree care question. And you can also visit our website, milwaukieoregon.gov/trees, for kind of comprehensive information about our urban forest program, as well as our existing public permits, as well as our other kind of urban forest resources we have available. So I wanted to give you some brief updates on the code changes that have happened since we were last in front of you on the 1st. Staff have been making some small revisions just for clarity around the text. We did add, based on some recommendations, to increase kind of incentives to preserve large trees of large diameters at breast height. We added some other significant tree credits for larger diameter trees, trees over 36 inches, and that would be reflected in the master fee schedule. And then we also added language related to enforcement fee mitigation. If the damage or removal of a tree that was unpermitted occurred not as a result of intentional avoidance of the tree code. Essentially, if it was if staff work with the property owner and determine that it was, I will say an honest mistake, or if it was not from malintent, it was just situational. So right now, our code doesn't allow much flexibility around fee mitigation, and so we added in additional language to allow for that flexibility depending on the situation. Are there any questions regarding these updates?
Can you point us to that language you're talking about?
So the language for fee mitigation, we're going to be adding that in the next version of the code. So in the staff report packet, it was not included just yet. But we just wanted to let you know that that's one thing that we are going to add based on some situations that we've been working through from our public tree code, that we realized that we should add in similar language for both public and private tree code. Okay, great. And so the next few things I want to run through are just a little bit of clarifying information from some testimony we've received from stakeholders. The first thing I wanted to cover is kind of around why 40% canopy cover and whether or not this is attainable. So we actually went back to our GIS data and we had our staff run some more analyses, and we actually found that for residential properties, exclusively residential properties, so this doesn't include commercial and industrial properties around Milwaukee, we already have a 32.3% average canopy cover, and that's based on 2014 data, which is our last data set. But then we just recently have 2019 data that we're processing currently that we'll be able to get updated numbers on. We also created this little map that you can see here. The light green are actually properties that are already around 30 to 39% canopy cover. So these are our almost there properties, is kind of how we're viewing it. And then the dark shaded greens are 40%. So I know that it's hard to kind of think of what does 40% canopy cover look like. Maybe, how frequently do you walk next to a property that has 40% canopy cover? And we just really wanted to show you this to realize it's very much attainable. There's plenty of properties around Milwaukee that currently have 40% and above. And it's hard to see when you're on the ground. And so this data hopefully shows that we're really close. And if we do a little bit more work, a little bit more preservation, planting, and programmatic work like we're doing already with our urban forest program, we think that we have a high chance to get there by our 2040 goal. Does anybody have questions on this map in particular?
Lisa, go ahead.
I guess this map leads me to a question I had, which came from some of the comments, which is, what about the rest of the city? So you've carved out residential areas here. And I guess, one question is, does this code apply to our mixed use zones, our multifamily zones, not just what we're calling the middle density zones now? And second, is there any plan by the tree board to address the commercial and industrial zones? We do have a fair number of trees in some of our commercial industrial zones. And I just wondered sort of what the plan was for working on those in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this only addresses, this map, you can see that it's what's shaded, it's hard to tell, but shaded in light yellow, that's our residential zones. And the draft tree code that we're bringing to you today and through this process is only applied to our residential zones. And that's because we were working on this process in partnership with the housing and parking code updates. And so we wanted to make sure that all of those codes were intertwining. There is interest, both from staff and tree board, to explore tree code for commercial and industrial mixed use zones. That will just likely happen at a later time in another kind of phased approach, similar to what we're doing with the comp plan. It would be kind of similar for tree code, where we would just have to look at it and see how we would build upon the existing tree code that we have. Yeah, Council President Heisey.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and it may be too much work, but this is kind of an interesting map, and I'm wondering if it would be possible to make it a layer in the super cool tree tool that I'm now giving you an opportunity to tell the public about.
Yeah, thank you. So this is definitely information that we're hoping to kind of create and make available to the public. There's some tools that we can use, a story map maybe. We do already have a Branch Out Milwaukee tool, that's trees.milwaukeeoregon.gov, that folks can explore down to the parcel level, some canopy cover data. And that's kind of a unique tool that took a little bit of software playing, and I'm not going to pretend like I know how it works. In terms of the data set or like the coding. But we have some other kind of interactive tools at our disposal that we would be happy to at least make this available for the public to play around with and see how their own neighborhood does when it comes to canopy.
Cool.
Great. Thank you all. The next one that I wanted to talk about is Cherry-Gale Farms. And, we've been hearing around information or questions regarding the tree canopy for this development. And then we've also been hearing questions around, the housing density, the design of the development from all departments within the city. And I just wanted to kind of remind the community, because it was a very, long process that it doesn't really stand out, but the Cherry-Gale Farms was actually designed under county standards. And then it was later annexed into Milwaukie once that design was already established. So, if this development were to be developed under Milwaukee's existing standards, it would potentially look very different, including with either more trees, tree canopy, tree preservation, but then also looking at the shapes of the houses, the lot coverage, et cetera. While we have standards that kind of work in parallel with the county, our standards are different. So under the existing standards, it would look different. And then especially as we look at having tree code or this, updated housing and parking code, it would look even different from our existing Milwaukie standards. So while this is a great example of a large development that occurs in and around our community, it's a changing target what we're looking at. And this code hopefully would establish guidelines to make sure that we do have space for trees, appropriate space for trees on the lots, and that the houses are designed to complement the natural resources of the area. So I know planning has been receiving some questions about this, and we have as well. So I just wanted to make sure folks know that we understand, and that Cherry-Gale Farms, it's a great development. It's some beautiful houses, and it would look a little bit different if it was designed to upper Milwaukie standards, both existing and in the future. And then with that, I just wanted to ask if there are any other clarifying questions around the draft code or what I've presented tonight.
Yeah.
And I'll just show this really quick too. For more information, you can always email me, reach out to our Urban Forest phone line and email address. And then I also wanted to make a correction too. Last presentation, I mentioned that we got our 40% goal from the American Forests Institute. That's my need to put some sort of title at the end of it. It's actually just American Forests. It's an organization, and you can find them at americanforests.org. All right. So with that, I'll answer anyone's questions.
Lisa.
I have quite a list of questions, and I guess I have some that I feel like maybe I should hold till later, but I have some that if we're going to have public comment, I don't know if any of the people here are here to comment on this or not, but there were a few that I felt like at least would be good to get clarification before public comment. So one of the ones I had was, and a lot of these were prompted by the comments, if no trees are removed from a lot, say a lot just doesn't have very many trees, but it's being redeveloped, no trees over 6 inches are being removed, do they still have to plant up to a 40% canopy? Is that an expectation?
If there's the land is being subdivided or an additional housing unit is being placed on the land, then yes, there is the canopy planting standard. So you have to plant back up to 40%. But if no trees are being removed, you really don't have to worry about the preservation mitigation or anything like that. It's truly maybe just 1 or 2 additional trees on the site that we'd be happy to work with them on to figure out the best placement for.
Okay. And one of the people asked if we are requiring all tree work to be done by an arborist. Can people still cut prune their own trees?
Absolutely. This code does not regulate the maintenance or pruning of trees on private property. There's even some conditions in our tree code for removal where we don't require an arborist to make any designation. It's for only certain situations such as hazardous trees or tree risk assessments where there are qualifications that arborists need to go through in order to become certified to do those reports. And that's why we define it in the code.
Okay. So when in the part of the code that talks about the fee in lieu of planting, the fee is considerably lower for trees in the right-of-way, public trees. It's about a third or maybe less than a third of what it is for trees on private property. What's kind of the rationale there?
You know, I think that was put in order to really be for one thing, we acknowledge that the right-of-way is small. And we understand that there's limited space in order to plant trees. And there's some situations in where you already have quite a few street trees within a 10-by-3 planting area. And if you're adding in a driveway, there's not going to be space within the right of way. We decided to add in a higher planting in lieu fee for private property in order to essentially encourage folks to choose planting a tree over paying in fee in lieu. There's also additional things like some abilities for staff to be more engaged and help out with right-of-way relocation of planting. And even, if somebody replants within the right-of-way, we have higher visibility and we can make sure that tree is doing well. And so it was just essentially a fee structure that was made in order to encourage folks to choose to plant back, but we're open to suggestions if that fee should be lower.
Okay. I noticed that on the fee, I want to talk about trunks crossing property lines. So there are, as I understand the code, if a trunk is say 80% on your property and 20% on another property, how that works or how that's calculated or how much it costs you or how much it counts toward your canopy goal is different if the 20% is on the right of way versus if the 20% is on your a neighboring property.
So for it can get really confusing, and we understand that. The way that the code is written, and we're revising it to be more apparent, is if any portion of the trunk crosses the right-of-way line, it is treated like a right-of-way tree. And so in our development standards, where you're doing a little bit more math, right? There are some situations where we say on-site trees versus off-site trees. On-site trees being private property trees, off-site trees being right-of-way trees off of your development site. In those situations, off-site trees might have a 50% canopy credit is in our canopy standard versus 100% for existing trees on-site. And that's to essentially account for the canopy overhanging onto the private property. But for our non-development tree code, which is what the majority of folks will be potentially using, if the tree crosses the right-of-way point at any point, that's a public tree, and so it needs a public tree permit. So there's kind of a different public permit process for that. So there's not any of the 20-80% when it comes to it if you're just doing that simplified tree removal permit. And then even when you were doing the development tree code, it's either a public right-of-way tree or it's a private tree. If any portion of that trunk crosses the right-of-way line, then it becomes a public tree. So we don't make people do any fractions when it comes to like 20-80%, for example.
But I do think I would add on to that too, and maybe we can take a little bit more of a detailed look and make sure that it's clear as when a tree crosses an adjacent property line. So when it's shared between adjacent property owners, in that case, I do believe that that tree, in terms of its canopy calculation, we would provide that full canopy credit to that property because it's crossed that line. And that sort of becomes an issue with the adjacent property owner too, in terms of a removal of that tree, because both parties have an interest in that tree. I think that's something we probably need to just sort of take a little bit deeper look at there and make sure that we've got that covered. But I think that's a really good question.
So, can I jump in here, Lisa? Because the question I have is analogous or in this realm. So, what is the philosophical thinking about making the value for preserved trees and or newly planted trees to a development that are in the right of way only 50%, given that shading the street is probably of higher community benefit than shading a lawn, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a portion of it is that we have, as the natural resource team, we have more ability to go plant within the right of way on public property. When it comes to development, the only discrepancy, the only standard that shows a discrepancy between right of way trees and private trees, on-site trees, is the plant back to 40% standard. So what we have is we say, okay, if you plant a tree within the right of way, 50% of that canopy overhangs onto your property, roughly. So you can count 50% of that tree as your 40% canopy coverage.
I get the concept of what we are proposing. What I'm questioning is the logic behind it. Because in my mind, you do code to cause benefit or to protect benefit, right? We're not just doing this willy-nilly for our jollies. So if the higher benefit to the community is to shade the tree than it is to shade the yard, and that I get is my argument, not yours, why would we only give you 50% credit if you're shading the street?
I think it's just simply we were looking at the private property itself and having a 40% canopy coverage for that private property. And then if you plant within the right of way, only half of it is over that property. It's something we can look at in terms of how we can affect this or change the standard and change kind of those canopy percent values. But that was the logic behind making it 50%. It's because half of it goes onto the property. So we count as half the tree.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Lisa. Sorry I had to interrupt.
No, it's fine. So in the fee schedule, there's a fee range for trees from 8 to 14 inches. And it just seemed kind of funny to me that we have this 12-inch barometer that's the breaking point for having to do certain things. So it was weird to me that was 14 and not 12. Like that wasn't where we changed the fee structure. Was there any particular thought behind that?
I think I can add, I think we did that so it was sort of matching what we had on the public side. So, when you looked at the public tree code fee schedule, it sort of had that same range of tree diameters there. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of what that's probably the main reason why.
Okay. I have a few more questions getting into the language of the code, but if you want to do public comment or whatever, or if other people have questions. I don't know if you want me to go on or...
Well, it depends. Like you made the point, some of this would inform comment potentially. If those questions you think will inform comment, then go ahead and ask them. If you think they more lead to...
I don't.
Argument, then yeah, okay, cool. Let's go to public comment. Who do we have signed up, Scott?
Over here. Mr. Mayor, at this moment, I have no emails and I see no hands raised. We have turned off the chat because we found that helpful during the hearing, not to encourage chat during deliberation. I can turn that back on.
You have a hand, Scott.
You have a hand. Okay. So I've turned the chat back on. I will turn it off when the comments are off, done. We have a chat. So Stephen Lashbrook. Stephen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Lashbrook. I live in Milwaukie in the Llewellyn neighborhood. I submitted testimony this morning, which is considered to be pretty much unforgivable, but just so you don't have to spend a whole lot of time with it, I really raised 2 points in that testimony. The first one is I really think there is need for a no-fee, very simplified, streamlined permit for clearly dead trees. There, as I read the code, there's the proposed code, there's language about dead or perhaps dead or maybe dying trees and the need for an arborist to make a determination. I'm talking about the dead as a doornail trees that we see around town. And I made the point in my note that I can see 2 of them from my living room where I'm sitting right now. One I think is a right-of-way tree and one's in my backyard. To me, it doesn't require much expertise to go out and see, oh, well, this tree hasn't had any leaves on it in years. And by the way, the branches are brittle or they're falling off in the windstorms. I think we need to property owners need to be able, and the city too, needs to be able to deal with those expeditiously and not have some process to have to go through or to have to pay a fee to remove them. So that's my biggest pitch. The other one was I kind of ended up in my neighbor Virginia Seitz's corner, and I think she submitted testimony to you. Okay, then I don't really need to belabor that, except she had told me that her husband had planted trees on their property many years ago with the express purpose of harvesting those trees because he has a sawmill. And that to me seems like an exceptional case that's worth noting. So that's all I really wanted to offer. I continue to be a supporter of this effort. I mentioned the fact that, man, it's been a long time coming. The 3 women from PARB who did all the work to put the tree city status in place, you know, that seems like a generation ago almost, and one of those women isn't even with us anymore. So anyway, I really do support this effort. I mentioned that I've been responsible for administering tree codes in other communities, and I really appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this. It's not an easy task.
Thank you, Stefan. I was actually hoping you would speak and make that very point. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the rest of your testimony, both written and spoken. Thanks. Scott, anybody else?
I'll check the email one more time, Mr. Mayor. I don't see anything else.
I'm fascinated. Okay. Then, let's see. Have you received any additional correspondence on this topic? The question is, since when? It's been rolling in steadily.
It has. For the record, I will say, and Natalie, if you want to correct me if I missed something, let me know. But I have received, let's see. We received, where'd it go? We received, I think 12 pieces of correspondence. One from Detmer, and I just have last names, I apologize. One from a Detmer, 2 from Paul Anderson, 2 from Anthony Allen, 1 from Teresa Bresaw. I think we received it from another Anderson. Elvis Clark submitted one. Stephen Lashbrook. Councillor Beatty sent an email this morning that was included in the record. Lisa Gunyon-Rinker and Marcy Wambach. Did I miss anything, Natalie?
No, not that I'm aware.
And that's all being collected and will be posted online with the exhibit version of the packet that'll get posted the day after the meeting.
Okay. I realize that I skipped the whole thing here. I'm going to go ahead and read it just to give people who are teetering the time to raise their hand or whatever. Does anyone wish to comment on the amendments to the tree code? The council will now take public testimony on the proposed amendments to the code. I will recognize speakers and any questions should be addressed through me. When you speak, state your name and city of residence for the record. For those who wish to testify, you may submit written comments by email to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. Staff will read those comments out loud. For those who wish to testify in Zoom, please raise your hand. For those participating in the Zoom webinar by phone, to make a comment, dial 9 to raise your hand. For those calling in, remember, it says that twice. Presentation times for all speakers will be limited. Representatives of groups will be limited to 10 minutes. Individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. Please confine your remarks to the proposed action, avoid repetition and irrelevant information.
Mayor, for those folks who have called in, it's *9 to raise your hand.
I'm sorry. Yep.
And we did, there is a new hand raised. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to promote them?
Sure.
Neil Schulman.
Welcome, Neil.
I'll set the timer at 5 minutes for Neil or 10.
He's representing North Clackamas Urban Watersheds Council, so it's 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. As you know, I'm Neil Schulman from the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. I've been obviously tracking this process throughout, and I was really going to kind of sit back and watch and not say anything, and then I realized that that's probably just not possible, and I really just did want to thank the council for really pushing this forward. It's obviously a very complex set of code. It's obviously tied in with a lot of complex questions around the fee structure and what really incentives the keeping of existing trees. And I really wanted to make this brief and highlight two things. One of them is the concept that is in this code that is critically important, that turns trees from a nice afterthought to a vital part of our city's public infrastructure, is a critical step. And it is one that I think if Milwaukie leads on and leads on boldly, other communities in Clackamas County will follow. And then the second thing is I really urge the council to adopt this code without delay. It is obviously we all know after the heat dome what's coming up in future years. And I really encourage the county to adopt the code that we have spent all this time working toward. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. All right. Anybody else, Scott?
Mr. Mayor, I see no other hands raised.
How about email? Nothing?
I'll double check one more time. No email. I did open the chat again just to help. We do have it in hand. Jacob Sherman.
Welcome again, Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba, Council President Heisey, and councilors. I think also wanted to just briefly chime in and show support for the tree code and the amendments that you've made throughout this process. Speaking as an individual, but as a member of your planning commission, we thoroughly looked at this ourselves, and I think through your process, you've made several important kind of amendments along the way. And I think echoing some of the sentiments you just heard would also encourage you to kind of pass this expeditiously and, because amendments could be made in the future. And I think, as was pointed, trees really are important infrastructure, particularly as we probably head into another year of climate chaos. So wanted to again thank you all for your work on this, but show some additional support for the code.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, and the rest of the commission actually for your good work on this yourselves. You guys have done some real heavy lifting this last several months. And I want to personally thank you for the earlier part on the Japanese internment work. Thank you for bringing that forward. That was really important. Okay. Any others? Scott?
I will check the email again. Nothing there. No hands raised. And in the chat, chat has been turned back on for the moment. I see nothing, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Does staff have any response to the testimony?
No, not tonight.
Any thoughts about how we could craft a obviously dead tree section?
That's something that we have discussed internally and with tree board, and stakeholders have shared thoughts on both sides of the table, and it's something that we can continue to work on internally and see how we can reflect that in the code.
Okay, because I think, obviously there are gray areas, but obviously there are also trees that aren't, anybody would absolutely know for a fact are dead, and it makes sense. Lisa.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear what the argument is on the other side. Is the argument that people will misuse it, that they will cut trees that are not?
Yeah, I think it's just, speaking from experience from some of the arborists on our tree board, as well as some other stakeholders, just that they've seen trees that look dead. And there's some folks who view trees as dead in the wintertime. And it's just a level of situational expertise. And I would agree that there's definitely some trees that are 110% dead. And then there's other trees that are in the gray area. So
it's interesting. The West just recently, I guess West removed a tree along Eagle Street, or maybe the city removed it, but it had been dying. It was a conifer that had been dying for a few years. And actually last year, year or two ago, it was really pretty. You could tell it was dying, but it had this neat kind of color to it. And then it, like over this last summer, it was clear it was dead. And I didn't never see it marked for removal, but one day it was gone. So anyway.
The one thing I would like to add, and I would just remind everybody from last week, I think Natalie mentioned that, we certainly would, if somebody thinks that they have a tree that's dead, that we offered to have our urban forester go out there and take a look at it. And sort of do that first look at it and say, yeah, it is dead. So we are offering that service.
And so if that happens, then no permit is needed. That's just the go ahead. You can go ahead and remove it, or
well, we still have that. The way that the code is written now, there is still that permit requirement. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's something we could certainly take a look at.
Justin, you had your hand up for a second.
No, I was just getting ready to pounce in case we slipped into a little bit of deliberation. But you pulled it back, so we're okay.
All right. So does council have any more questions, Lisa?
Yeah, I'd like to hear staff's thoughts about the harvest tree, and we haven't really, we kind of talked around this whole idea of agricultural exemptions, and it seems to me the tree harvest is another agricultural exemption. I guess I don't disbelieve that people might have planted trees with the intent of harvesting them down the line, but other trees like those removed at, Mission Park were also harvested. I mean, they were used, by lumber mills or whatever. They were bought trees. They weren't just, so I guess, has there been any conversation about that at the tree board or with staff, and what were the thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, we did have conversation that in fact started all the way back with the Mission Park development, and several of the tree board members were at that time very frustrated that these big trees that were parts of those neighborhoods were were harvested for their economic value, and that there was this discussion about not wanting to allow sort of that tree or forestry work in an urban environment. So, that has been a discussion point with several of the members, previous and current members, that they didn't like that thought of having harvesting trees within the community.
Do you see harvesting trees as different thing than the agricultural? As I recall, the code lands on agricultural exemption only if it's like enough to be a business or something. Actually do maybe
we did. Yeah, we did look into that. And we had some discussions at our last tree board meeting in January about this, and Natalie and I talked about it. And we looked at the sort of that agricultural exemption being more of like, you are providing some sort of food or nuts or fruit and nuts and those sorts of things as from those trees, as opposed to a forestry sort of
a timber product.
Timber, yeah, as opposed to timber.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, I was just going to say, this also draws back to having a code that is attempting to be clear and objective in a very gray area, and particularly on the staff side, making the designation over if somebody is removing a tree for. How do we define if any tree being removed is for timber or for firewood or for any kind of other similar product? For our code, we do provide commercial exemption for commercial, agricultural or horticultural purposes, and that's because those are easier to define. We have a holiday tree farm that can be very apparent. The trees, once they reach a certain height, are then cut down or culled, and same with kind of an orchard setting, while more of the timber setting is very unique, especially in an urban environment, and you're not seeing these large timber tracts like you do in maybe rural Clackamas County. So it's simply from I think not only some of the arguments that Tree Board have been weighing themselves, but also on the staff side to make sure that we're consistent.
So at this point, you do not foresee any changed language on that, and this is just an issue for us to debate when we get to deliberation?
I would say yes. I think this would be an item for deliberation. I also do want to remind folks that we do provide some language in the code that allows for the urban forester to make some designations and situational designations. So, depending on the circumstances, there could be a unique situation where our urban forester and our existing or our draft tree code process could result in different removal fees for a stand. It's not baked into our code because we see the complexity of the situation.
Angel?
Yeah, I have a question about the timing and administration of this code. And so but if anybody else has any other questions for staff, I think, mine is kind of more just procedural. I understand we've hired a consultant to help us with the administration process of permitting tree to implement this code. And I was curious.
Yes. Go ahead. I was going to say that we do have a contract process underway for a larger permitting system for the entire city to transfer over to, with tree code being the first permit to essentially go through this process.
Gotcha. And when do we think that will be up and running?
So we have it, and I think I would defer more specific questions to Brandon Gill, our IT director, because he's the one managing this contract process. But it's my understanding that the original contract, when it was drafted, said by March 15th. That is now fast approaching, and we need to still work with the contractor on it. But there are also, so hopefully by March 15th, we'll have this live permitting process, or shortly after. And there are temporary things that we can do in the meantime for online permits, online fillable PDFs, in-person permits, that we can fill the gap until then.
And is that, I mean, that template, that permit, has that been drafted? Do we have some idea of what that would look like, and how would someone actually apply for a permit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so staff have been working on drafting a template for a private permit. One thing I will say is we're pulling this away from our engineering right-of-way permit, which is already very confusing for public trees, because you kind of look to see if there's a tree permit, and instead we send somebody to this ambiguous kind of right-of-way permit. So we're working on integrating a public tree permit and a private tree permit to make it very easy for folks to fill it online. Once this is up and running, we're hoping that we will have a website that then we can send people direct people from our City of Milwaukie website. And then it just becomes a process question on just making sure we have all those documents on staff side lined up for that implementation date.
And
I also wanted to just add, part of what makes it difficult for us to have a final document is that we don't know whether or not there are changes to this process, and whether or not you all are actually adopting this in full. Defining the calculation for properties differently would change that permit. Changing the permit amounts would change some of it depending on where you weighted them. So there are actually changes that are going to happen once council approves this. We are going to actually have to spend some time figuring out how to get that out. So yes, we have a template, but I also just want to weigh that with, we also have work to do once the package is approved by council in order to get to the end goal. Thanks.
And I would also, if I could also add, we are working on engagement material to provide the public on how to navigate the permitting process, both for a public tree and a private tree.
So I'm a little, it's a little less than clear to me. So when we spoke about it before, I mean, we heard from people tonight saying, pass it now. We're obviously not ready to pass it tonight because there's still pieces that staff is drafting. But as I understood it, our advice from our attorney was we couldn't really pass it now because of the concerns that, there may be changes that we need when we do the housing code. Is that still the view, that we really need to keep them in tandem?
Is that a question directed to me?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's really up to the five of you to decide. Certainly there has been some discussions about how deliberations and some considerations in the separate hearing for housing and parking may reflect on decisions that you might want to insert into the tree code. If that's the case, I think probably the cleanest course of action would be to continue the tree code hearing, allow the housing and parking hearing to be initiated and begin, and proceed to a point where within that hearing you can deliberate on issues that you believe would impact the tree code. Close that hearing at that point, move back to the tree hearing and infuse those issues, whether you want to allow public comment on some of them, allow staff to present how they would reflect those in, say, the tree code, just so that information is within the hearing of the tree code, because we have technically separated these into two hearings. So for record purposes, we need to kind of discuss those things at the staff level, perhaps take some public comment on them, and enter deliberations for the tree code. that is one course of action that you could choose to take. The spectrum is all there in front of you for the 5 of you to decide what you think would be your best course of action.
My next question was going to be about whether if we close the public comment part of this hearing for today, we're not saying we're not going to open it back up, because I do think that we need to have the conversation, start the hearing about parking and housing. And I do think that could inform pieces, at least, and potentially, it would maybe prompt some additional question and feedback that we would get from the community on the package as a whole. And so the way I read this part of the script is that we're simply closing public comment for today,
right,
but leaving it open, the opportunity for a later.
If that's the direction you would choose, it would be a motion to continue to a date certain, which would be perhaps the next hearing. You would close it just as we did 2 weeks ago. We're closing down public comment for the period. We're continuing, and we can pick it up again at a certain point. Let's say, for example, the housing and parking issues take an evening or two to get through. We can simply open and continue the tree hearing to the next meeting if time, it's all a lot of balls in the air, right? Because we've got some long and meaty subjects that Vera needs to get through.
And maybe we continue this out. I mean, I still have some questions to go over, by the way, but maybe we continue this out to the second meeting in March to allow the focus at the first meeting to be the housing and parking. Because I guess I hate the idea of having people expecting there's going to be a tree code discussion, putting it on the agenda, and then saying, oh, we're going to continue that over now. I think we ought to make the decision. We're either going to, if staff's going to be ready to have the revisions they're working on for March 1, great. If they'd rather have the more time and let March 1 be all about housing, parking, maybe, in terms of the public, I don't want to notice a parking hearing if we're not going to have a parking hearing.
Right. Well, if that might make some sense given the hour today. We're nearing 8 o'clock. Vera's not going to get through her presentation tonight, which means we're probably not going to get to public comment tonight on some of these issues. Clarifying questions from the 5 of you, of course, and then moving into some format of deliberations where you can discuss some of those issues, front load those discussions perhaps with issues that inform some tree code issues, right? And then we can pause the deliberations in that forum, reopen the tree code at that point, and take some additional public comment. Let staff in that interim period between hearings, let staff prepare some materials based on what we've heard in the housing and parking code discussions. It's really kind of a housekeeping exercise to keep these two moving in tandem. But it's not beyond reason.
Before we wander too far into all of this, I would like to, I think we need to have some deliberation tonight. I think there are questions that are going to affect the formation of the code. As we have just been informed, there are pieces of the code they're still working on. I don't want to piddle around for 2 more months and then come back and finally have the deliberations on the code, and then we go, oh yeah, we're going to have to go write some more things, and so then we're pushing it out several more months. I would like to at least start deliberations tonight on the tree code, and then we can continue it to whenever, whether that's the next hearing or the following. I think Lisa's logic is sound that there's no way we get through enough of housing and parking in one meeting to do that. So we can continue it to the second meeting in March, but I would like to do some deliberation tonight so that some questions that have arisen can start to get answered.
My only comment on that would be that it can create kind of a confusing and inefficient record when you deliberate on things when the public record could still be open, right? So if you
We do it
deliberate
all
on
the time. It
has occurred at times. I think we typically try to limit deliberations until after we close everything, but it's your hearing. The five of you can decide how you want to proceed.
So it's my intention to go into deliberations on the tree code tonight.
And I was planning on making a motion to continue this hearing without deliberating, because I still feel like I still feel very strongly that we need to deliberate on all three of the major parts, because they impact each other and are so intertwined that they cannot be. But if what I'm hearing is that we are going to open it back up and allow additional public comment and reopen the public hearing on the tree code and still keep these in tandem, then I'm okay with that. But that is, I think just procedurally, it certainly complicates things for us.
Sure, but there's no way we deliberate all three of these in one evening.
No, I was not suggesting that we do, but we are, but if we're deliberating now, we are going to have to open back up the public hearing to be able to then continue to deliberate on trees in light of the other element, the other aspects of the package. And we're going to have additional questions.
I'm actually fine with that. I have always had a problem with the very stilted process of staff presenting, people kind of blindly, whatever they've been able to read and garner from the packet, giving testimony, and then they hear us start to deliberate, and they go, wait, no, that if we'd have known that, and they never get a chance to testify again. So I get that it may be a little messy and confusing, but I also think it's a lot more human. And this packet of codes is very human, if nothing else. It is literally about our daily lives. It's about how we live in our houses and how our trees and our yards and our parking and all of that. There's kind of nothing more intrinsic that we touch than what we are talking about right now. And I think it's important that we make it available for people to comment as we move through this process. There are things that I think we don't have right in this code, and I would like to talk about those so that we can determine whether that's a majority thought or just me, so that then staff can work on that and people can then comment on that.
So if we are going to do deliberation on the tree code tonight, I think we should be clear about what we are communicating to any public who might be here to participate in giving feedback on parking and zoning, and state very plainly that we're not going to get to that tonight.
No, that's definitely the case. We will not get to any public testimony on parking or housing tonight.
With apology.
Well, and again, bringing it back, right? So folks who maybe, we're here to talk about parking and housing. Fundamentally, I think we are doing ourselves a disservice, and I don't think we're having, and I don't know, I can't predict what pieces of this code you want to talk about, but I do think that there are elements of this code that people who also have parking and housing concerns or, comments could potentially impact some of the deliberation that we might have on this council about tree code. And so I'm not in and there's no way, right, that we get all of our deliberations on all of these, this entire thing, but that is actually how we originally had it packaged. And we did have it as one hearing. I recognize, and I will again on the record apologize for going along with separating these. But I worry that we, by delivering this and by saying to people, hey, you're off the hook tonight because we're not going to talk about parking and housing, we are potentially going to talk about impacts on housing and parking, depending on what part of the tree code you want to talk about.
Okay. So if people are truly interested, I'd recommend they stay tuned to all of the meetings we're going to have for the next 3 months.
Quick question. Sorry, Counselor, can I just ask, are you all saying we're not deliberating on anything regarding the housing and parking, or not presenting everything? Because honestly, I'm going to let Vera go home if we're not going to be presenting.
It's 7:56.
Okay.
We certainly can't get through all of Vera's presentation, and I hate breaking those up because I think that makes it harder to hold all that stuff in your head. So I would just assume that she began her piece next meeting.
Okay. Is there general agreement from the body? Okay. Vera, you get to go home. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, Vera.
As a matter of order, do we need to open that hearing and continue it to a date certain, since it's been noticed for this evening?
I was going to suggest that very procedurally.
So we need to pause temporarily the tree hearing,
or just do it at the end.
We can do it at the end. Okay.
Also, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say there is a hand raised, and I think it was during the tree code when the group was talking about taking tree code comment, and there is a question in the chat. So if you're still interested in taking comment on the tree code tonight, there seems to be a couple.
Okay, well, we have not yet officially closed the public hearing portion of the meeting, so sure.
You want to do that now?
Yep.
Okay. We'll start with the person who's the phone number who's called in, so I do not know this person's name. But person on the phone, can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself?
So phone number ending in 156, and I think how can we remind them how to unmute?
I believe that's
*6.
*6. That's *6 if you're on the phone.
We can unmute them, I think, maybe. Can we?
I've been asking to unmute them, but I don't know. Oh, here you go. Are you unmuted?
Here we go. They are unmuted. Phone person, go ahead.
Are you asking me a question?
Yes, you had your hand up to give testimony on the tree code?
Yeah, I did have my hand up for the tree information.
That's what we're still...
I'm waiting. Are we still discussing about the tree?
Yes, we are.
I'm a property owner in Milwaukie for 42 years, and I have several large trees on my property, so I'm very concerned about this. I've gotten way behind on it, and first red guy in the Milwaukie Pilot. Regardless, what are the fees going to be? What are the commit fees going to be to the residents?
Ma'am, can you
cost of the permit fee going to be? Have they established the cost of the permit fee?
So that's a fairly lengthy document that's in our packet tonight. There will be more opportunity to comment on the tree code, so I would suggest you take the opportunity to find the fee structure in our packet and take a look at it.
I can request a packet. So you have a packet that I could request and learn everything and get up to date on this.
Yes, it's actually online. You can download it from our website.
Can you state your name for the record? Can you state your name and city for the record?
Sure. My name is Geraldine Butcher, and I live in Arden Walls area.
Okay. Yeah, if you have trouble finding that, reach out to Scott or Natalie, and they'll help you find that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then the other one is the chat from Marcy about thinning.
Correct. Yep.
Natalie, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I'll just say that thinning is from approved. Sorry, I have a cat who's trying to call me. Like approved thinning is one of our type 1 approval standards for our non-development residential code. So as approved by an arbist for tree health, that would be a type 1 standard, which means it's just that for $50 permit application fee, no removal fees.
Okay. Anybody else going once, going twice, just for this evening? There will be another opportunity. All right. I would entertain a motion to close the public comment portion of the hearing.
I'll move to close the public comment part of the hearing on the proposed for tonight.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public comment part of the public hearing on the proposed tree code amendments for tonight. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. The public comment portion is closed. So, is there council discussion? Kathy would like a break. 5 minutes? All right. See everybody back in 5 minutes.
What's the photo behind? What's your background tonight?
That is what Santiam Canyon looks like right now. Those are all dead trees with frost on them.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it's very stark out there. It's really. I'm trying to get into burned areas and do photographs. I'd really like to get up to Opal Creek because I have before photographs of Opal Creek. So I'd really like to get after photographs. They're keeping all those areas very closed. It's really hard, but I think it's important that we can illustrate the destruction of the fires and how important it is that we do something about climate change.
Is that old growth forest behind you there? Or was
I don't think it's old growth. I think it's second or third growth. But, those trees are probably 30, 40 years old and, probably a foot to 2 feet DBH.
The Opal Creek, now I think that was old growth forest.
That was old growth, exactly. And that's why I really want to get in there and photograph that.
I saw some pictures of the redwoods down in the Big Basin State Park. That they had that fire down there. Was that last year, 21 or 20? 20. And I think it was in 2020. Yeah, the fall of 2020, and a large majority of the redwoods are like resprouting from. Redwoods have this ability to sort of regenerate and regrow even after catastrophic fires. They're able to do that. They're like an everlasting, ever-growing tree.
I'm blanking on the kind of tree, but the trees that you predominantly find on the western or on the eastern slope around Bend, what are they? They smell like vanilla.
Jeffrey pine or ponderosa pine?
Ponderosa pine. Those also, unless the fire is super hot, actually kind of depend on fire. But if you get a super hot fire, it will kill them. But the bigger the trees are, obviously, the better shot they have at surviving. So it goes back to the place of we need to be establishing more old growth, not cutting down what little old growth we have left.
Yeah, I wish I've not had a chance.
I believe we're back on the air.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right. Is there any council discussion? If not, I have a lot, so I can go for a while. All right. I'm going to put it on my other screen, so forgive me for not looking at the camera. And I'm going to be really poor at giving you pages because I'm working from the very first draft that we got on this, because that's what I marked up, and I wasn't going to redo it every single time we got a package. Also part of my frustration of dragging this along. But in the definitions, we have a definition of crown. It is not a good definition. It means the area of a tree above the ground. Well, the trunk is just above the ground. That's not the crown. So I recommended the Wikipedia definition of the crown. The crown is a woody plant. The crown of a woody plant, tree, shrub, or liana, is the branches, leaves, and reproductive structures extending from the trunk or main stems. That to me makes a whole lot more sense. Next item.
Hang on a second, if you don't mind. So the current definition is crown means area of the tree above the ground measured in mass, volume, or area, and including the trunk and branches. And I believe that language was specific to that because there's reference to it in the code for, in part of the fee structure, I think. Or there's definitely reference somewhere important to volume and area.
I'm fine with adding volume and area if you'd like. My point is that when you say the crown of the tree means the area above the ground, the trunk is the area above the ground, and it is not the crown. I think the crown should be differentiated from the trunk. And it goes on to say, and including trunk and branches, but it's not a good definition.
Well, we'll take a look at that definition and make sure that it's the appropriate definition and it matches the intent where we use it in the code. So we'll take a look at that one.
So
if you're going to go through definitions, I've got one.
Okay, go ahead.
Soon after that, which is the diameter at breast height. In the document, there's lots of places where we just use diameter. I assume we're meaning the same definition. We don't say at breast height every time. So I think we need in quotation marks, diameter or diameter at breast height is what we're defining. Because I don't imagine we're measuring the diameter anywhere else. So just so that the word diameter as used in the code means diameter at breast height.
Okay.
So in here, we changed planning director to planning manager. And I understand that we currently have a planning manager and not a planning director, but a year and a half ago or whatever it was, we had a planning director. So if we go back to having a planning director and we've put in the code planning manager, doesn't that create a problem? Why don't we just say the designee of the city manager?
Totally fine with me. We have done that in other departments.
Okay, 16.32.020, pruning corner clearance. Subject to enforcement under MMC 12.12.010, any tree, shrub, or other woody vegetation overhanging any street or right-of-way within the city must be maintained by the owner to ensure that no vegetation obstructs the right-of-way. And two things. One, at what height, right? Depending on what you're driving, it's going to obstruct different things. I think we need to establish a height that we require. And secondly, I think it also needs to say more clearly, does not obstruct vision of the intersecting right-of-way or the intersection or whatever, because you can clear for a car to drive through or a truck to drive through and still obstruct the vision for the street that you're approaching. And I think that's as equally important, if not more important, than just clearing for the right-of-way.
Okay. I will say just in general, so on much of the, the tree code was existing tree code that we revised with the public tree code. So in this process, most of the revisions that we did on the older part were generally maybe some changes in definitions and some minor tweaks here and there. So we really didn't, like this obstruction piece, we really hadn't looked at in detail. Since
I get that, but it's just, both from comments that we got and just thinking about it, I felt like that needed a little more clarification.
Okay.
I have a comment and I'm trying to find the paragraph that it's referencing. Hang on a sec. Okay, so 1632.021, dead or diseased tree removal on private land. That paragraph kind of begs the question of how city staff would know of such a tree. And it implies in a certain way that we'll be wandering around on people's property. I think maybe some clarification about reported, how would city staff, how would the forester know that there was a dead or dying tree on someone's property? I think it needs to be a little more clarified, because a lot of the comments we got were people nervous about city staff just coming in and wandering around on their property.
Yeah, and I think the intent of that section of code there, and that was in our old public code, that was this piece of that language was there when there was a dead, diseased, or dying hazardous tree that was causing a problem that might affect the right of way or public property or adjacent property. And generally, those circumstances were generated from adjacent property owners, neighboring property owners would make a call to Tim and say, hey, my neighbor's tree is dead and dying and it's leaning over, it's going to fall on my house or fall in the street. So
right. I'm just asking that we create some little bit of language that sort of goes to that gives some explanation of how that's going to occur. So to put some folks' minds at ease. My next one is more substantive, and it is actually a policy question. So you guys ready? clear and objective tree preservation standards under 16.32.042. And it gets into the affordable housing development that meets the exemption standards. And what it boils down to is that we are not holding affordable housing properties to the same high standard that we're holding everybody else. And it's a philosophical question. One way to look at that is the concerning way, is that we don't believe poor people deserve to have as many trees as everybody else. Right? And I know that's not how we mean it. What we're trying to do is make it more affordable for affordable housing to be built. And I am all for that concept, but I also believe, and we know for a fact because of the reports that we got from Donovan, that lack of tree canopy in poor neighborhoods actually causes problems. It causes lower healthy birth rates. It causes all these things. So I'm bringing it as a question to this council. Is this the right way to make an affordable housing project more affordable when it comes to trees? Or do we want to somehow incentivize or kick in or whatever so that affordable housing places have as nice a tree canopy as everybody else?
Could you please give me that number again? I was listening to you, but my attention was split. I'm trying to find the piece of code.
Got it. It's 16.32.042, tree preservation and planting in residential zones.
And I think that section was written fairly substantially between January and now.
Was it?
Natalie's nodding.
Crap. See, this is the problem with. Okay.
Natalie, do you have a page, an RS number for us by some chance?
I don't have the RS number on the tree code document. It's probably page 17 for you.
RS 54.
RS 54.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Lisa.
I have a printed version, which doesn't have that. I was going to say there is still a question around, do we reduce mitigation fees for affordable housing? That's still existing, even with, we did remove that table from the code to frame it, essentially to have the same 30% benchmark for affordable housing and for all other housing developments. But in the proposed fee schedule, we suggested, or we have reduced mitigation fees for the affordable housing, qualified affordable housing. So the question is, do we still have reduced mitigation fees for qualified and affordable housing?
That I'm more okay with. I mean, again, we're trying to do what we can to make affordable housing be more affordable to build. But by the same token, we want it to be as livable as possible. So I'm personally okay with reducing or even exempting. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, the kind of developers that develop affordable housing don't tend to be the cutthroat type of developers that are going to just take advantage of everything they can take advantage of. They tend to be more mission-driven kind of people. So I don't think we, take the chance that, there is no mitigation fee if we don't do it, so let's not do it.
Would this apply to a homeowner who was using CET funds to build an ADU?
If they were going to make it affordable for 30 years, blah, 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 all those things, right? and be held to that.
But if we eliminate the mitigation fees, I mean, I think reducing them is definitely something to consider. But if we eliminate them, do we end up with the same result? We get less trees on those properties.
I mean, some of these people, they tend to try and do the rules, right? And if we say we expect you to, come try and hit 40% tree canopy. And there's a part that I want to get to that may speak to this a little bit. I want to have conversations about, I brought it up a little bit earlier, about how we're rating street trees. Because I personally think that a street tree is in some ways more valuable than a tree planted in the middle of the yard that's not going to ever shade the street. It's going to reduce heat island effect. It's going to be absorbing stormwater that, is not otherwise going to be absorbed, right? Because it's going to land on the street. Whereas one planted in the middle of the yard, if the tree wasn't there, it would just fall on the lawn and be absorbed. It's, what I'm saying? So to my way of thinking, there is actually a street tree is more valuable than one in the middle of the yard. So we should both allow that to count towards the 40% and, on both ends, right? Both on preservation and on replanting, I think. And it also will help with all the people that have tried to show us the math that you can't get to 40% on all these lots, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you plant street trees and you count the full 100% of it, I do believe you can on any lot.
Mayor Gamba, can I make a quick comment on that? Just on, on a tree on private property, not necessarily a street tree, but, those trees do provide more benefits than just the stormwater benefits. So there's, those homes do get the co-benefits of shading from that, sure, which reduces their energy, perhaps their energy usage in the summer. It keeps the house cooler. So, there are those benefits as well.
Right, but what I'm comparing it to is a tree. Let's imagine a bigger yard, right? And you've got this tree that's out in the middle of the yard, and that shade never touches the house. It's oriented in such a way that the house is not affected by the shade of that tree. It's only shading lawn. Well, you and I both know that the way a lawn behaves and black asphalt behave on a hot summer day is entirely different. So from a heat island effect, that tree that's shading the street is far more valuable than a tree that's simply shading lawn. Right?
They certainly have different co-benefits, yes.
So that can come into this. What do the rest of you think about whether we reduce a little, reduce a lot, or not charge mitigation fees for low-income housing?
I guess I'll say again, I'm a little concerned. For me, the trade-off, we're not talking about all the trade-offs together, right? Right now, we're putting trees against affordable housing. We're not talking about some of the other trade-offs. And I think that I would be able to have a much better response to your question if we were deliberating on additional pieces of code that we're not talking about tonight. So, for example, you mentioned pavement. Parking off-site is going to require some pavement, probably. There's another trade-off, right? So I'm with you, and I totally appreciate and hear the concern, and I understand the concern about heat island effect impacting lower income communities the most because lower income housing tends to be built in those areas. I would suggest that the code we're talking about tonight isn't as applicable to that conversation, because we're talking about our residential areas that currently are zoned 75% at detached single dwellings. So we're not talking about highly industrial areas out by I-205 where there's seas of concrete. We have some of that, but we're not even talking about tree code for our industrial areas or our commercial areas. So to me, like, I feel like it's sort of I'm not even comfortable having, like, this isn't the trade-off that I want to be talking about necessarily. We need to be talking about the other impacts, the other barriers, in addition to trees, that conflict with some of our other goals.
Okay. Other people?
I think I would suggest that if there are portions of the tree code that we are going to discuss that are less adjacent to parking and zoning, we could tackle those. I mean, you said you had a long list, so maybe just find the places on the list where there are fewer intersections.
Well, I mean, the whole point of keeping the two together is that we will come back. So there's nothing we say tonight that is boxing us in that we won't be able to revisit. So exactly. I will answer your question to say I like the reduced fees, but I don't think that I would eliminate the fees.
50%, 75%?
Either. I mean, I think 50% is reasonable.
So the fee structure that we have in the master fee schedule does have a 50% reduction from the current, or from the non-affordable housing, the regular housing. So we went from, I think, $4,000 per increment to $2,000 for the affordable housing developments. And that's for that preservation standard.
Okay. Desi, thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with Council President Heisey. Like, talk about your points, but I would prefer to hear the packages about housing and parking before this, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess there were, in your remarks earlier, Mayor, it sounded like you had specific things that you felt needed to be clarified for the public to make sure that the conversation going forward was sort of smoother and cleaner. So if you can
and so
those things,
so
you see where I'm trying to go?
Yeah, and so that staff has a chance to work on code changes if we are all leaning towards a code change, so that when we get ready to pass this, it's actually done and it's not another 2 weeks or a month down the road. Okay. So 16.32.042D is the public right-of-way portion. Number one of that public right-of-way portion is confusing to me. So if it's confusing to me, I have to assume it's confusing to somebody who's not been doing code for 12 years.
Are you talking about the D mitigation standards?
talking about C, clear and objective tree canopy standards number 1. 75% of the mature crown area of planted on-site trees from the City of Milwaukee street tree list, or as otherwise approved by the urban forester. It just, I don't know if it's the way.
We can work to clarify that and make it maybe simplify that. But what we're trying to say there is that for every tree that you plant on that developed property, that's within the boundaries of that property, you get a 75% credit towards its mature canopy to count towards your canopy goal.
I mean, I would agree that this is confusing. Broadly speaking, I find much of this code pretty challenging to read, and I don't have 12 years, but I'm ahead of your average resident on this. So, and I honestly don't know what to do about that. Either we streamline some processes and lose some granularity, or we really commit to creating some tools for people who are, I'm thinking like a website that has a decision tree that takes you through things and explains everything. Like we create some really robust tools that help people understand what's going on. Or we just start with, you want to do something with a tree of whatever diameter, call us.
Well, I mean, and the part that we're looking at here is in those development situations. So, we're working with that developer along with the planning department.
Sure.
To sort of walk them through that.
I guess maybe part of my issue is still, the very opening part of that whole, the whole concept that a street tree is not part of the development. I mean, when a developer comes in and let's say they're doing a whole subdivision, we make them plant street trees, right?
We do.
That's part of our standards. So how is that not part of the development?
We can look at those percentages.
Right. And that's where we get into the philosophical question of which is the more valuable tree. And if it's more valuable, why would we de-incentivize it?
I think that is a philosophical question, depending on who you ask. If I put on my wildlife hat for a second, I would say that a yard tree, which is surrounded by vegetation closer to potential natural resource areas, further away from streets, can provide a vastly different habitat type than a street tree. A street tree, while it is microhabitat, and it's something that we do need to be increasing in Milwaukee, especially thinking about pollinator habitat and greenways, for some bird species, for some tree mammal species, they avoid street trees because of the presence of streets. So it very much depends on what value we're looking at on determining which is better, a street tree or a yard tree. So, but there are those percentages we can play around with. And that's something to consider too as we look at habitat connectivity, which I know is going to be in the natural resource component of the phase 3 for the comp plan implementation. But the backyard habitat program from the Audubon focuses on yard habitat because it's a bit of a sanctuary for wildlife.
So I don't know.
Fine.
I don't know what I think on this question, but I will throw two more variables out there. One is, a street tree is where it has to be a size that's kept under the wires is probably less valuable than a yard tree, which can be a bigger tree, right?
So that's half of them.
Yeah.
Ish in Milwaukee, unfortunately. Well, not in a new subdivision though.
Well, not in a new subdivision, that's right. And the other thing I lost track of. Sorry. I thought I had a... Yeah.
I guess it's a visceral experience for me. I obviously ride my bike everywhere. And during those hot days, when you ride out of a neighborhood that has no street trees into a neighborhood that has pure, total street trees, it is literally like riding into an air-conditioned room. It is that big of a change. And that is because that black asphalt is not sitting there, absorbing all that heat and then re-radiating it. And that is the heat island effect. And that's a major climate thing. It's obviously going to become a quality of life thing in the not too distant future if we don't get our act together. I think street trees are every bit as important, and we need to prioritize them equally to yard trees.
Well, and I would just add this, because, we do require people to plant street trees anyway. So the goal of this standard is to have new development plant trees that at maturity will provide 40% canopy. So there's already that requirement to plant street trees. So we're trying to get more trees planted.
Get a little more juice, yeah.
So get a little more juice. And so by having that reduced standard for that requirement that already exists in planting trees requires the developer to look at their site to see how they can plant more trees on their site.
Don't we allow curb-tight sidewalks? And I know we have recently, so we don't always require street trees. I want to make sure that we're actually we're all on the same page here. I'm thinking about a recent plan that showed curb-tight sidewalks. I hate them, by the way. And Mark, I agree with you that I deliberately planted very large, huge trees for exactly the reason you're talking about, along my street, both in the public right of way and on my private property, for exactly the thing that you're talking about. Because in 100 years, my trees will be providing shade. But I also am kind of understanding why we might, it's not necessarily that we're trying to we're not trying to discount them, but I understand why we wouldn't be giving full credit for canopy. But I'm sort of open to this idea a little bit more, I guess, because I understand where you're coming from. But I can also see why we might want to say, why we're saying, but some of the canopy isn't counting toward your canopy goals on your private property. Maybe there's a different way we can talk about that other 25% or 50% of the tree and what benefits there might be to, you're going to start to really hate me saying this, but other trade-offs that maybe we could be talking about to get you more credit or
I get it.
More bonuses.
I totally get it, Angel, and I've understood from the day one that you've said this. I just don't think I don't think there's a situation where we are going to be able to talk about the full inclusivity of all these things in the level of detail that we need to talk about. That's going to stretch over 4 nights, and means it's stretched over 2 months. And I don't know about you young people, but my memory doesn't work that good.
Well, then I guess I would put a pin in this. I'd like to, see what sort of response Natalie and Peter might have to looking at those percentages and where there might be adjustments that we could make for either, credit toward canopy coverage or maybe some other ways that, we might be able to get people credit for those trees.
Right. So besides the planting aspect, let's say a property already has a couple, 3 beautiful big street trees, and it's going to be so much easier for them to do this construction and move their big yellow machines onto this property if those street trees are gone. And since they're only counting towards 50% of their canopy towards their 40%, they're less valuable to them.
Or I'll do you one more. What if they have these big, beautiful street trees and they can get their dozers through the trees without harming the trees, but they're going to lose one if they have to add a driveway?
Driveway, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
I would add for that situation, we do have a public tree code, which is meant to complement this private tree code. So if there is a tree in the right of way, we do have a little bit more discretion around preservation. And this private tree code, this is on the planting side. Our preservation standard for our private tree code is only for on-site trees. And that's because we're trying to define public tree and on-site private tree, which is maybe going back to Councilor Beatty's earlier question around, it can get confusing defining which one or the other. So we have to very much explicitly try to separate them.
So one question and then a devil's advocate kind of a thing. First, the question. So you have a book or a table or whatever that tells you the estimated canopy size at maturity. Is there also a book or whatever that tells you which trees infiltrate sewer and water lines and that we don't allow those in the right of way? We
do have a street tree list, and that list is viewed for those circumstances.
It is. Okay.
And there's also additional construction requirements such as root barrier and distance away from utility lines that we do impose to ensure that we're reducing the risk of conflict between trees and utilities in the right of way.
Okay. Because I think that's where I was going to, that's where I think like gamesmanship. Somebody says, oh, I'm going to put in 3 trees or 4 trees in the right of way because I know in 5 years I can take one out because I can say it's infiltrating my whatever.
I mean, every list has the best intention and every tree planted has the best intention. I mean, trees being sandwiched in between hard infrastructure and pipes will always be at risk of trying to grow, which is why we really value yard trees and private trees, which have a lower risk of running into that infrastructure.
When I planted my 3 street trees, part of the process was actual utility location. So I don't think that's even that's dealt with on site before you're even allowed to pull that permit and plant those trees. You're not allowed to plant them over top of the utility.
Not over top of, but how far?
You're not allowed to plant them within a certain distance. They actually come out and mark where you're allowed to plant those trees.
And that would be for the public utilities, but the property owner probably has a little bit more discretion, at least on their private property, on their property, and where they're planting a tree in relationship to a service line that's going into their building. So, that is something that's important to keep track of. I will also say that, with improved construction standards for, services, root infiltration in the future should be less of a problem than it was in the past, where we were using, clay pipe that was jointed together, right? Or wooden pipes. And now, you generally will see, some sort of PVC that's got a welded, chemically welded joint that prevents some of those root intrusions.
Okay.
And you had a devil's advocate thing?
No, that was it.
Okay. So the last one that I have marked right now is the when it talks about replacing trees on an equivalent number of inches if the tree is over 18 inches. It's so far down in the list, I can't find which, I can't give you a 16 dot, whatever. I mean, I could keep scrolling up and find it. But it says approval standards, the urban forester will at a minimum condition the removal of a tree based on MMC 1632.042 1.2A3, and the urban forester may require up to an equivalent number of inches to be planted for the total diameter inches of a tree being removed if a tree is greater than 18 inches DBH. Again, it's going to be hard for people to wrap their head around. And I think the answer here is what Stefan keeps going back to, more pictures, less words. I think this would be a really excellent place for some kind of an illustration or a visual that's going to help people understand what we're trying to cause there.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
So that's it. I mean, the really, really big one is my advocacy for around street trees. So, I do understand where you're going, but the comments, both from the side of people saying it's impossible to do that on some properties, and from the standpoint of my belief that you do code to cause behavior, I think street trees are exceedingly important and should not be discounted from other trees. But I look forward to having more of that discussion when we're talking about driveways. So that's all I've got. Anybody have any other things that they want to talk about before we are into all of this code?
Well, I've got a couple more just kind of minor word choice things. One of the things that is in that all of that soil standards stuff is this idea of soil being contiguous. And I had this conversation with Natalie before, but I'm a little concerned about that word contiguous, because to me, I mean, contiguous just means it meets at some point, right? So you could have half of your soil be you could have a tree, you could have the corner of a house and the corner of an ADU that come together, and there's maybe 5 feet in between. And so that soil out beyond those corners is contiguous, but is it really adding to the health of the tree when it's that far out there? Is it really what we're trying to get to with like having adequate soil for the tree? So I'm a little concerned about that word contiguous, which appears a handful of times. I don't know that I have a better word, but just wanted to flag that. And I think I had one other minor thing. By the way, there was things in here that I Googled and learned all kinds of things, like no climb fence. I'm like, what's a no climb horse fence? I'm like, what the heck is that? And it's a thing. Who knew? You can find it in Google. Oh, yeah, you can find it at Amazon.
That's what I fenced my goats in with.
Oh, is it? I just also wanted to point out we have a gap in numbering, and it was just decided to leave it that way.
Yeah, we discussed with Justin, and essentially it was, there's some of this that was, I will call it legacy gaps from the prior public tree code. I think there's also an ability to insert later sections if needed. But it's really just, it sounds like it's just a formatting question on whether or not we want to leave those open gaps. I remember you mentioning before having some sort of statement saying this is intentionally left open.
I mean, that's what they do in the federal code. They'll say, reserved, sections number, blah, 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 reserved. I don't know if that's really intentional or that's like post facto justification, but anyway. Okay. I thought I had one more thing, but I'm not finding it, so I won't hold us up. Oh, I know. Yeah. In page RS 56, at the top, mitigation standards, there's fee in lieu of canopy preservation. I mean, I think you're really saying the fee in lieu of is fee in lieu of planting, right? So I think you may want to use that as a phrase, like fee in lieu of planting, because it's kind of a weird, I don't know. I just put that out there for you to think about.
That's D1 you're talking about on RS.
D1 and D2 both have it in the first sentence. Fee in lieu of canopy standard. Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's usually you're saying what it's in lieu of, and it's not in lieu of the canopy standard, it's in lieu of the planting. So that's just
to meet the canopy standard. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we noted that before too as well. Okay.
Right. Nothing else from me.
Anybody else?
You know, I've said it already, and I just kind of feel like I need to say it again. I know that code is complicated, and I expect that. When it is regulating people's private property, when it's this challenging for an average person to read, I think that it is presenting an unintended, but a very real barrier for engaging with the public. And I think it is creating a sense of distrust and raising a lot of questions and creating confusion. So I appreciate that staff is working really hard to have some way to have a lot of outreach materials, but I just have to say that in and of itself in this process is troubling, because it's showing up everywhere in conversations online that people do not understand, and they're trying to understand this. They're putting in the time. They're coming to us with testimony that makes it clear that what we're putting out there is not accessible. And so when it comes to having a public process that feels authentic, I understand why people are concerned. And I know there's only so much we can do about that, but I have to lift it up because it just continues to trouble me. And I think it gets this off on the wrong foot. You know, I do think we need a tree code. I do think that we need regulation that supports tree preservation on private property. That said, I also understand why people are getting their hackles up about feeling like they're being told what to do. And I don't think we've told the story in a way that illustrates that, okay, why we ended up here, or at least part of my understanding of why we ended up here, is because we had developers come in to places where there were trees and they clear cut it, and the community was outraged. And we are trying to build some code that will make it harder for that to happen. And in order to do that, necessarily, it does involve having some regulation on private property, because there's a point at which somebody's house gets sold to a developer. And in that transfer, bad things can happen to existing trees. You know, the people who had 70 mature fir trees, 100 mature fir trees before, that was somebody's house. That was somebody's personal private property. So there's just something that we aren't articulating well to the public in this discourse that I think is really important. And I hope that we can do a better job of that. as we continue this conversation, as we continue this hearing, because I want people to know that we are hearing, that they're worried. And I'm hoping we can do a better job of connecting what we have heard from the public around trees, and that people love their trees and that they want to take care of them, with the end goals and what it takes to get there. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm just kind of speechifying at this point because it's too late and I should stop talking. But there are a lot of feelings running around there, and I want, I think we need to acknowledge that there's some good reason that folks are getting really concerned.
I think as staff, we definitely hear that. I think we're walking that line of making sure that we have a code that matches our land use regulations and balances with the very complex housing code. And I 100% understand where you're coming from, because I try to look at Vera's code and my head spins, and I only can imagine that people think the same of the code that still sometimes makes my eyes cross, even though we helped write it. That's why the outreach is going to be really critical. And I think there's also an element of advocacy that as staff we can do, and we really support other advocates in the community to really express that message of why this is important, why we need it. Because at the staff level, we have the direction only of approved plans and policies. We can't necessarily voice for the community that we're hearing. We try to reiterate maybe some of the things, and we appreciate you saying this. I appreciate you saying this, Council President Heisey, because I think it is something that I've heard anecdotally, but it's very, I can't, as staff, write it down. So yes, I think it's a really confusing code to just try to sit down and read. And I applaud anyone who has been doing that to stay engaged in this process. And that's why I do really hope that folks reach out to us staff so we can help walk them through it. We have our urban forest phone line. We have all of this to reach out. And I do want to say too, things like flow charts, things like pamphlets, things like that, they're in the works. We just kind of have to wait until we have something adopted before we can really publish them, or at least, invest a lot of resources into them. But they will be there. So it is a very confusing code package. We understand we're trying to make it as simplified as possible while also being granular in particular situations. But our intent is to make something very understandable, especially when it comes to the permit application process, when people are just simply going online. Where do I fill out a permit? We've been working internally to make even a single form, buildable form for both public and private together that walks you through it. And that's our intent on this. So even though hopefully the code is kind of confusing, we can have the staff resources to help the community understand it, and then have the online resources so that way people aren't spinning around in circles, because I can understand why it's very difficult and your eyes cross reading it.
But I would also add, though, we'll certainly take this opportunity to see where we can simplify and make it easier to understand as well.
I mean, I think part of the story is that, there's only so far you can go to simplify it, because state law requires us to have this clear and objective standard. So we can't, really trees are a perfect example of where you would want to have just a reasonableness standard. This sort of a, discretionary reasonableness kind of standard to adapt to the different situations on a different lot, but we're not allowed to just do that. This looks more, it's almost 50 pages of code, or 35 or whatever, I'm sure people are like, what? But a lot of that is dictated to us by what the state law requires us to do.
I would love not to edit 50 pages of code. Trust me.
Well, you guys are doing a great job. I have to say, this is complicated. It's hard. It's very controversial. I really do feel like we're getting pretty close to the sweet spot, if there is a sweet spot. And it's your hard work and the hard work of the tree board and everybody for whatever that's been, 6 years.
I'll add too, one benefit. There are many jurisdictions in the metro area that already have a private tree code. And one thing that we have in our advantage as being one of the last cities to adopt a private tree code is that we can take their learnings. And as complicated as this code is, you should see how complicated some of the other ones get. And I give major props to staff at other jurisdictions for walking through it. But I've already heard that people are looking towards Milwaukee's draft code as directions for their own jurisdictions. So you guys are also providing us great direction on this, and hopefully we'll come up with something that's a win-win situation for everyone.
Excellent. Look at that, 9:01. Okay. So if no one else has anything else that they would like to talk about tonight, then we need a motion to close this hearing and continue it to a date certain. And that would be what, March 14th?
Well, Mayor, that's one of the questions I had tonight. So we had said that we were actually going to hear the package for housing when Vera was here on the 1st. And I just want to confirm that that's what we're going to do. And then we would continue this to the 14th, and we would continue any discussion after that. Is that correct? Perfect. Thank you.
15th, I believe.
Is it the 15th? That's I couldn't. Yeah.
You're correct. Thank you.
You want a motion?
I would like a motion. Yes, please.
I move to continue the hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Code Amendments File ZA 2021-002 to a date certain of March 15th, 2022.
Counselor, do you want to add the words tree code just to make sure that motion's clear?
Sure. I'll move to continue the hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Code Amendments to Tree Code File number ZA. Okay.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to continue the hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Tree Code Amendments, file number ZA-2021-002 to a date certain of March 15th, 2022. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None heard. The hearing is continued to a date certain of March 15th, 2022. Now I will need hearings to both open and continue the Housing and Parking Code.
I move to open the hearing on Comprehensive Plan Housing and Parking Code Amendments, file number ZA-2021-002 to a date certain of March 1st, 2022.
I think that, sorry, Council, I think the procedure is, Mr. Mayor, you just gavel it open and then there would just be a motion to continue it.
Okay. So,
oh, I see. I apologize. So you were just
Good effort. Good effort.
So why, but it says the continued public hearing, and we haven't had a previous public hearing, so that was a little confusing to me.
That's true. That's just a hangover from the review of the script. So just cut out the word continue.
Okay. So the public hearing on the proposed Housing and Parking Code Amendments, file number ZA-2021-002 is called to order. I'm not even going to read the rest of this because it doesn't matter until next time. Now I would entertain a motion to continue it.
I'll move to continue the hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Housing and Parking Code Amendments, file number ZA-2021-002 to a date certain of March 1st, 2022.
A second.
It has been moved and seconded to continue the hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Housing and Parking Code Amendments, file number ZA-2021-002 to a date certain of March 1st, 2022. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. The hearing is continued until March 1st. So my hope is that we will not only be able to hear staff's report on that, but also have time for public testimony that evening. I don't know if Vera's given anybody any indication of how long her thing is, but
I think there's a couple of things to note. One is it is at least a couple of hours of presentation. So be prepared for that. The next piece is we are trying to do 2 nights of public hearing, so that would make sense. So you would open it at the first meeting, and then the second meeting would be on the 15th. And then you would enter into deliberations. So I think generally that works, unless we have a lot of questions that come from council in the conversation during the presentation.
Okay. So for anybody who's still staying with us and watching, the hope is that we will have public testimony both on the 1st and on the 15th on the housing and parking, and then on the tree code again on the 15th. Sorry, this is so confusing. Okay. Any council reports? I was just throwing out there that the REACH code, we're not going to get it passed this session. It's running into the same labor brick wall that it did last time. So what's happening is, and I did not get to watch the hearing, but we are attempting to cause not a committee, what's it called?
It sounds like from the -4 amendments, there was a stuff and gut bill for it. I don't think the vote has occurred yet, but it sounds like it has strong support to create a legislative task force.
Task force, that was the word I was looking for.
Which means it will be get everyone at the table who has a vested interest and come up with an answer that really addresses the REACH code question. And it also comes with legislative staffing and some funding.
And we're hoping to make it more broad than just the REACH code, that it will also address existing housing, start to have that conversation as well. So it's both a win and a loss, right? We're not getting the REACH code this year, but when whatever passes next time, hopefully it will be more robust than the REACH code, which we all thought was supposed to be this quick and easy little step. Not so much. Anybody else, anything?
I'll just say, because there's been a lot of public hearings and Q&A sessions around this recently, the I-205 and the tolling that's related to the construction of the Abernathy Bridge continues to be a point where there's a lot happening. The Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation is meeting to discuss but not vote on this week on Thursday morning. And right now it's looking like we are moving forward in our conversations with ODOT to address some of the real concerns that people have had around equity, impacts of tolling along the I-205 corridor, and to further address a lot of the concerns that many of the cities very close to 205 have around people rerouting onto local streets. So I suspect we may have a vote on it in March, but we are not voting on it this week. And there are a couple of different ODOT hearings. There was one today, there's another one tomorrow. And if you just basically Google I-205 tolling, it'll pull you into that next hearing. And it's a great opportunity to ask questions directly of ODOT staff if you have them.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice.
Well, I would just note that, speaking of ODOT, it reminded me that I got a mailer, I assume everybody else did too, that ODOT is upgrading all the signals on 224 this year. It's kind of like an ongoing nebulous process. And I checked with Steve Adams when I got the thing, and he had not heard anything. Had not heard anything in particular yet on timing for our segments of that, but it will be something to watch for this year.
Yeah. Anybody else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Never mind.
Desi, I think that's your cue.
No, Ann was going to say something. I'll wait. Go ahead, Ann.
I was just going to say, for the public who may still be watching, as a reminder, we will be in person at the hearing. So I just wanted to make sure that we called out, if you're interested in being in person, you can actually attend the meeting on March 1st, or you can call in. Both will be possible, but just making sure those members who are waiting know. Okay, thanks.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.